So in this video, we're going to look at various types of examples around timesing by 10, 100 and 1000. So on this slide, you can see all the different types of examples we're going to cover. We're going to start by multiplying by 10. Then we're going to look at whole numbers, decimal numbers that lead to answers, and then move on to doing the exact same thing, looking at times 100 and 1000, and finally looking at times 20 and 400, how we can use them same concepts and apply them there. So the way all my videos work, I'm going to do the example on the left, which is I do. You're then going to press pause and have a go at the example on the right, which is you do. So in this first question, we have 3 times 10. So when you're multiplying by 10, you're just swapping the decimal one to the right. So writing 3 is the same as writing 3.0. We just don't write the 0.0. Similarly, writing 15 is the same as writing 15.0. So when you do 3 times 10, the answer is 30 because you hop the decimal one to the right, and 1 because it's times 10. If it was times 100, you'd hop twice to the right. So press pause and have a go at the example on the right. So this is nice and easy. It's 50, but remember it's 50 because there's a decimal there, and we're hopping that decimal one to the right, and that gives us 50. So moving on, we now have 10 times 10. Again, writing 10 is the same as writing 10.0. So when we multiply this by 10, we hop that decimal there, and we're left with 100. So again, hopefully for this one, you pressed pause and had a go, and the answer there was 120. Similarly for this one, we have 35. It's the same as writing 35.0 times 10. We're hopping that decimal one to the right. That becomes 350. And with this one, it's 47.0 times 10. We're hopping that decimal one to the right, and that becomes 470. And now the decimal is there. We don't need to write that decimal though. So now moving on to looking at decimal numbers. So now there is a decimal that we can see there. So remember, it's that same concept, times by 10. So that means we're going to hop the decimal one to the right. So that becomes 35. And hopefully you had a go at this one. Hop the decimal one to the right, and that becomes 47. Just a note here, you can write it as 47.0, but in maths we write 4, we don't write 4.0, so you don't necessarily need to write that, but that's what it basically look like. We just don't write that in. So now we have 5.0, so this is the same as multiplying by 5, but here's a decimal, hop it one to the right, and you get 50. Again, hop the decimal one to the right, and you get 60 there. Moving on, we now have 0.8. Again, the exact same principle. Hop the decimal one to the right, and that becomes 8. We do not need to write the 0 at the front because 0.8 is the same as 8. Okay, you do not need to write that. It's the same here. Hop the decimal one to the right, so that becomes 9. Again, hop the decimal one to the right, so that becomes 5, 4, 8. And again, hop the decimal one to the right, and that becomes 309. And now we will have a decimal answer. So the top of the slide tells you what type of examples we're looking at. So we're working through this step by step and get building onto harder and harder examples, looking at all sorts of scenarios. So times 10, move that one to the right. So that becomes 23.7. Okay. Again, times 10, move 1 to the right. So that becomes 65.4. Moving on, again, hop 1 to the right, so that becomes 90.2. And again, hopefully press pause and had a go at this. Hop it 1 to the right, and that is 88.2. Again, exact same concept continues here. So we have 06.4. And then moving on, here we have 3.5. You do not need to write the 0, so you can just write this as 3.5, and you can just write this as 6.4. So here's some practice questions for you to have a go at before we move on to times 100 and 1000. Press pause and have a go. When you're ready, press play for the answers. Here are the answers. Mark your work. So moving on, we're now looking at times 100. So again, remember, 2 is the same as writing 2.0. Now we're timesing it by 100, which means you hop the decimal once, and then we hop it again. So our answer becomes 200. So again, 3 is the same as 3.0 times 100. We hop once, and then we hop twice. And that leaves us with 300, and the decimal is now at the end here. We don't need to write the decimal in though. Moving on. Again, 45 is the same as writing 45.0. We're going to hop the decimal twice, so that's once, that's twice, so that's going to be 4500, and the decimal is now at the end. We don't need to write the decimal though. I'm just doing that to show it you. Again, with 87, we can write that as 87.0. There's a decimal at the end. We're going to hop the decimal twice now because it's times 100, and that becomes 8700, and the decimal is now at the end here, but we don't need to write that in. Again, I'm just doing that to show you. And now with this one, we hop the decimal twice, once, twice, and that becomes 231. And hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this one, so that becomes 357. In a similar manner, you hop the decimal twice. Now with this one, again, it's times 100, hop the decimal twice, that becomes 98. You don't need the 0 at the front. And again, hop the decimal twice, and that becomes 72. And with this one, again, hop twice, and that becomes 1723. And same with this one, hop twice, that becomes 32104. And now we are going to have decimal answers as well. So we hop the decimal once, twice. The decimal now ends up after the 7, so that is 237.2. Hop the decimal twice, 1, 2. The decimal is now after the 4. Hop the decimal twice. The decimal is now after the 2. Hop the decimal twice. The decimal is now after the 5. Hop the decimal twice. And in this case, we don't need to write the 0.0 because 0 doesn't have a value, so you can just write this as that. So I've purposely included examples like this in there as well that make you think, so well, what do I do with the 0? Do I need to write the decimal? Do I need to write it? They're both the same. So you can write this or this, but generally we just write it like this. And again, I've purposefully included this example as well. So in this case, we hop once, twice. So we have 1, 3, 2, 0. Now the decimal is there. So we do need to include the 0 before the decimal, but any zeros after the decimal, we don't need to include them, okay? So now we are looking at times 1000. So there's 3 zeros this time. So that means we're going to hop 3 times. So 2.0, we're going to hop once, twice, 3 times. So we have 2, 0, 0, 0 is our answer. So it's 2000 there. And again, hopefully you press pause and had a go at this one. We hop 3 times, so we have 3 zeros this time. So again, hop 3 times, and that becomes the decimal right at the end. Hop 3 times, and that becomes that with the decimal right at the end. I know I'm going a little bit quick through this bit, but I think we've had plenty of practice now with the whole idea of just moving the decimal dependent on how many zeros there are. So in this case we have 0.002.0. Again, we can ignore these zeros at the front this time. That's the same as 2.0, right? Remember, writing 8 is the same as writing 8.0. And this is the same as writing 08, but generally we don't write the zeros before, and we don't tend to write the zeros after. Now, if this was 8.01, you do not include that 0, okay? Just to make a point of that, you can include it in that case. So here's some practice questions for you to have a go at. Press pause and have a go. When you're ready, press play for the answers. Here are the answers, mark your work. And finally, we're going to move on to looking at, well, what happens when you have times 20, for example, and times 400 later on. So times 20 is the same as times 2, then times 10. But I'm purposefully going to write this way around. Times 10, then times 2. It makes your life easier, usually, to times by 10 first, and then 2. Okay, so similarly, if you had times 50, that would have been times 10, times 5. Okay, so that's how that works. So again, you can see how we can use that, what we've just learned about timesing by 10. Okay, so in this case, it's saying 2 times 20. Now I've told you that's the same as 2 times 10. Times 10 is the same as hopping the decimal 1 to the right. So we start off with 2 there. So it's 2.0. We hop the decimal 1 to the right. That becomes 20. And now we've done times 10. We are now going to do times 2. So that becomes 20 times 2. Now 2 times 2 is 4, and add a 0 on. Okay, that becomes 40. So just to show you that again in action, either press pause and have a go, or you can work with me. 4 is the same as writing 4.0. Now times 20 is the same as doing times 10 and then times 2. So we're going to times this by 10, hop the decimal 1 to the right, that becomes 40. Now that we have 40, we've done times 10, we're now going to times it by 2. 2 times 4 is 8, add the 0 on 80. Okay, so there's 2 steps now. We're timesing it by 10, then 2. moving on, again, exact same manner. We have 2. Actually, I'm going to skip this one. So moving on to this one. So we now have a decimal number. And now you can see why earlier I said we want to times by 10 and then 2. Yes, we could have done times 2 and times 10, but you can see why this makes our life easier in this example. So we have 0.4. Now it's easier for me to multiply this by 10 than 2. So when I multiply this by 10, I hop the decimal 1 to the right, that becomes 4. So that's that one done. And now I'm going to do 4 times 2. And that the answer is 8, and that's that one done. Now I could have done times 2 then times 10, but it's a little bit harder to times this by 2. Okay? So hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this one. So we have 0.2. And remember, this times 20 is the same as times 10 times 2. So we're going to first times it by 10. That gives us 2. Hop the decimal 1 to the right. And then we have 2 times 2, which gives us 4. And that's that done as well. So it's not always going to be nice and straightforward like the previous 2 examples. So I've purposefully included these 2 examples in here as well. So here we have times 10 times 2. So we'll start off with 1.95 times 10. So that means I hop the decimal 1 to the right. That becomes 19.5. I still have a decimal now, and I have to do 19.5 times 2. So 19.5 is close enough to 20. I know when I double 20, I get 40. So this is just going to be 1 less than 40. So this is going to be 39. Or you can just write out the column multiplication or however you prefer to multiply these decimals together. Okay, so in this next one, we have, again, we're going to have times 10 times 2. So we have 3.12. I'm going to times that by 10. And that becomes 31.2. So I've hopped the decimal 1 to the right, 31.2 times 2. So I can almost think of this as 31. If you double 31, you get 62. So that would become 62.4 there. Now we are looking at times 400. Again, think about, well, how can I break down times 400 using what I know? Well, times 400 is the same as times 100 times 4. Again, we're not going to do times 4 times 100 because it'll be a bit trickier to work this way around. So that's why I'm purposely writing the times 100 first. So I am going to do 2 times 100. 2 hops, that becomes 200 there. And then 200 times 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Add the 2 zeros on. So press pause and have a go at this one. So that's 4.0 times 100. So that is times 100 and then times 4. Hop the decimal twice, that is 400. 400 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Add the 2 zeros on. And now we have 0.4. We are going to do the exact same thing. Times it by 100. That becomes 40. And we are going to do 40 times 4, which is 160. 4 times 4 is 16. And the 2 zeros come through. 0.2 times 100. Again, hop the decimal twice. That becomes 20 there. And 20 times 4 is what we are left with. 4 times 2 is 8. Add the 0 on. That becomes 80. And now we have 1.2. Times that by 100. Hop twice. That becomes 120. 120 times 4. Now, you know 4 times 12 is 48. Add the 0 on. And then hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this one too. So times 400 is the same as times 100 times 4. So that becomes 1.4 times 100. Hop the decimal twice. That becomes 140. And then you just do 140 times 4 and you get your answer. So in this case, I don't know what 140 is, but I know 12 is 48, right? So if 12 is 48, that means 13 add 4 on is 52, and that means 14 add 4 on is 56. This will be 5, 6 with a 0 on the end because there's a 0 right there. So here's some practice questions for you to have a go at. Press pause and have a go. When you're ready, press play for the answers. And here are the answers. Mark your work. So that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found that video useful, there's so much other content like this on my YouTube channel. Please do check that out. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one.